Let's talk about this SCOTUS decision because I mean, I guess I could have saw it coming. It's a very, it wasn't a divisive decision whatsoever from the Supreme Court. It was right down the political ideological line. 6-3 decision, affirmative action in Harvard, and what was the other school? I don't remember. It was a public institution though, wasn't it?
North something. It was one of the Norths.
The North Carolina.
Right. See, this is why Ole, the lawyer, should have been here too. I mean, we really
covered it today, and I forget.
We need our defense attorney.
Right. It's really multiple levels here. But I mean, it's what can you say other than the fact that the right wing is celebrating this? They truly, really do believe that all their children who didn't get accepted into Ivy League schools and other elite colleges, the only reason that could be is because affirmative action gave their kid's spot to a Black or Latino person who they feel does not deserve to be in that spot. But I tweeted this out first thing because it's not going to change a thing when it comes to the right's perception of who gets accepted to schools. Even with affirmative action officially over in college with college admissions, you will still hear from right-wingers who will claim, oh, they're secretly still doing it. They're secretly still doing affirmative action whenever there is some sort of story or just a Black or Latino kid happily announces online that they got accepted to an elite school and the racists' kids were not accepted. They'll automatically still assume something. I mean, it already happens. There was that woman, that girl who
Abigail Fisher.
Yeah, it literally already happens, even when affirmative action is not even possible in a scenario where they complain that they or their kid did not get into a college. I mean, the one thing I hope that maybe this does is I really do hope that, and it's not going to happen, but, my best case scenario, Mr. Brightside over here, I really do hope this would be like a chip in the idea that these elite colleges and Ivy League schools actually matter. They actually determine who is really smart or who deserves a high-paying gig, because some of these fucking tech VCs who seem to have an opinion on everything and run everything, they're all from elite colleges and schools and universities. All these fucking idiots that we have to deal with now are from all these schools, and clearly they aren't any brighter than people who don't go to college or go to community college or just go to a regular 4-year institution that's not an elite or a prestigious school.
Yeah, there still is affirmative action, but it's for privileged white people. And AOC had a really good point about this. The 70% of legacy admissions are white people. That was not abolished. So this isn't about fairness, and it's honestly, it's an embarrassment, right? Because this is like going back to the Abigail Fisher case that Matt brought up. This is what white people and racists, quite frankly, have been using as an excuse for their own mediocrity, right? Abigail Fisher is somebody who did not get into the University of Texas in Austin after her daddy went, after her big sis went. And so rather than realizing that she didn't perform in the top 10% of her own class to get in herself and was insufficient, she claimed it was due to racism. She was a white woman, and the whiteness is what sunk her ultimately, because we know that being white in this country is very, very bad. And this is the way that it's always been, right? I think that David Dole shared a great article from Elie Mystal where he talks about how he was there in college, and then this white person whose name was on a fucking building was telling him how he basically got there, didn't deserve to be there. It's so ridiculous. Like, there's this assumption that affirmative action is to favor mediocrity, somebody who doesn't work better, when that's not it. Like, people have this perception of affirmative action, which is insane to me, that it's like, okay, well, this white kid with a 4.0 GPA, he's going to get denied. So this Black kid with a 2.5 GPA gets in. That is not how it works. That's never been how it works. The way that it works is race can be one of many factors after the initial factors are first discussed. And it could be seen as a benefit, not the main thing. So there's extracurricular activity, SAT scores, your GPA. And then also, for the first time, they can use race as a positive as opposed to a negative, which is how it's been historically, where it's like, okay, well, this person is from an indigenous community. They've been historically left out. We could bring them in. But because that threatens the, racial hegemony of white people in this country, they just couldn't accept it. And the irony of this whole fucking story is that, do you want to know who benefits the most from affirmative action? White people. White women. Yeah, white women. Yeah. And it's not necessarily bad because gender inequality is an issue. Women have been historically left out of education and employment. So ironically, like, Black people are getting blamed by conservatives, right, for affirmative action and whatnot, when in actuality, they didn't benefit as much. Like, affirmative action, it's a meager attempt to right this historical wrong. It didn't really do a lot to add inclusion. So we need to go further, but we're going backwards. Like, we can't even have fucking baby steps in this country. It's really honestly frustrating.
I got the study in front of me right now, and this is from, it's been published now by NBC. It says, study from Harvard finds 43% of white students are either legacy athletes related to the donors or the staff, and that number drops dramatically for Black, Latino, and Asian American students, with less than 16% each coming from those categories, the study said. So there is already affirmative action, but it's affirmative action in kind of like nepotism, and hey, you were here, your dad was here, he was a bad person, but you hopefully won't be, you'll be good.
And we should be clear that this deals specifically with race-based admissions, as opposed to so this actually doesn't this doesn't. So the idea, I saw some people replying to Ole. Ole brought up how white women benefit from affirmative action. This doesn't touch that. This is specifically about race. So it is a specifically racist decision here. And I also saw there's some idea out there because Roberts in the decision said that actually there's still a lane for schools to allow this sort of affirmative action, just not in the way it's been done. But Ali Mistal, who was on MSNBC, who, by the way, when it comes to any SCOTUS decision, I usually go to Ali Mistal because he is an expert in this field specifically. So I want to bring up his response to that argument that this somehow still allows these sorts of admissions.
Affected his or her life, so long as they are treated based on her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race. What's your reaction to that caveat from John Roberts?
That John Roberts is one of the most successful political animals in our system, and he put that line in there explicitly to confuse the press as to what he's doing. The incongruity of that statement should be obvious. He's saying that colleges can care about diversity, but he's taking away the way that colleges care about diversity, right? He's taking away the actual policies and programs that allow colleges to do what Roberts says they can totally do if they want to, right? So again, it's a feint. It's a way to kind of shape the narrative in the press. On the ground, as you already mentioned, we have examples, we have evidence for how this is going to play out in California, in Michigan, in other states that have banned affirmative action. And we see that diversity goes into the tank. And that's what Roberts wants. That's what these 6 conservatives want. They don't care about the diversity. They don't care about the 14th Amendment's racially ameliorative programs, right? Like, people need to understand, affirmative action, the first time that happened in American history was during Reconstruction. And the people who promulgated affirmative action during Reconstruction passed the 14th Amendment so that they could have these policies like affirmative action in the 1866 Civil Rights Act. And the 14th Amendment was explicitly designed to allow these policies, and now the conservatives are taking the 14th Amendment away and kind of redeploying it, not to foster racial equality, but to make mediocre white kids feel a little bit better when they apply to Harvard. That's the upshot of it.
Bingo. I mean, even with affirmative action, people of color, Black Americans, Indigenous people, they still have to work twice as hard to get half as far. But this small little Band-Aid solution, which didn't even do as much as people thought it did, You can't even have that in this country. That's how racist this country is. It's really sickening. And then at the same time, you have people like Tim Pool flipping it and saying, well, if you support affirmative action, you're racist because this is racism against white people. It's just we can never have a serious conversation in this country if this is the way that things always turn out. It's honestly really frustrating. And I think that the NAACP president put it best, that the worst thing to ever come out of affirmative action was like Clarence Thomas, right? Because that is an individual who George Bush chose because he was black, right? He wanted to replace the Supreme Court or put someone on the court who was black. But Clarence Thomas is a conservative, so there's not as much like hysteria over there. But when Joe Biden tried to do it and said, I want to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court because we've never had one, people automatically started screeching about that and claimed, oh, well, it shouldn't be based on race. It should be based on merit. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is the most qualified, the most experienced person on the Supreme Court. But still, there's this perception that, oh, nope, if merit wasn't considered at all, I think that Ellie put it best when he said, yeah, this is about mediocre white kids just having, the ability to get what they want. That's literally what this is just about.
Which also goes to Binder's point, by the way, where even if, there was no affirmative action for the Supreme Court, but people are claiming that's what's happening because Biden chose Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Right. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And the incredible thing is that these right wingers or even just racist white people or really literally anyone of any race who thinks that someone of a different race than theirs took their spot. Because I know that the right loves to, they're so proud of having seemingly, sort of been able to bring a number of, Asians into their conservative ideology, at least on this one sort of topic here. The number one thing, actually, that takes the place of someone trying to get into one of these schools isn't someone of equal background who's just a different race. The number one thing is legacy admissions. And they never address that. They never care to discuss the people who already went to these elite institutions, who had means, or people who didn't even go to these schools but give money so that they can be like an honorary member of the school. And then their kids get automatically accepted because of money or the prestige of their family name, or like you brought up
wealth
before.
In general makes it easier to get to college. You can have tutors, you can have a better housing situation if your parents don't have to work double jobs, or they don't have to do app economy stuff, or they can be home and they can love you and they can provide for you. All of these things factor in, and not to mention a lot of people.
Everything we just mentioned is certainly accurate, but it's a different level for the legacy admissions. Like, someone.
I agree with you. I'm saying that they have an advantage that's unfair. Especially considering how it falls along racial lines.
Yeah. Also, I know, obviously, like you were saying, the 1% way overrepresented in Ivy League schools and all that stuff. But even if I was looking at high schools. There are these elite high schools that I think that, to me, this is the big thing, is these elite high schools that kind of feed into these Ivy League schools and all that stuff. They invest 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times more than the average public school student. So to me, that's part of the problem is you're just reproducing that inequality. That's it. You're just reproducing it because you're investing more in the student who doesn't even really know what's happening. You know what I mean? So to me, the affirmative action is such a mild correction. I mean, I think we need way more than something as mild as affirmative action, which is basically just you're still competing under the same quote unquote, under the same cutthroat conditions, but we're gonna try to do some mild correction. It's, of course, you shouldn't get rid of it, but it's definitely not enough to me. I mean,
I agree. That's what makes it so frustrating to me, because it's it's such a small thing.
Absolutely.
It barely makes a difference. And you can't even have that, right? It's really frustrating. So, when you zoom out, it's how do you actually fix bigger things, right? If a small little policy like affirmative action is so controversial, then how do you actually address the lack of wealth in the Black community? Like, can we ever actually get reparations under this, under this environment? Can we ever actually eradicate systemic racism? Like, it just feels really hopeless. And I feel really upset about that because it's so frustrating.
I think that's the whole game. The whole game is to keep the conversation there, to keep it in. It's to throw treats to the right, also racist treats, but it's also to keep the conversation there, to keep to keep it in the frame of meritocracy. Like, oh, this is interrupting quote unquote meritocracy.
Right.
So we're fixing that, right? Instead of what we already know works. I mean, we have models for the best education systems in the world. I always talk about Finland. You make it public and you make it great, and then you can have something
spicy take. Take that people shouldn't pay out of pocket for secondary education. In fact, a lot of Scandinavia pays you. They'll give you money for stipends to be able to live and pay rent and eat and stuff like that. But I think we all want more doctors and nurses and super brain cranium masters. So
not only that, hey,
exactly.
we want more artists studying under the great artists too. We want our
of the cranium masters.
Of the more cranium masters, yeah.